Chapter 53. The Second Day of Imprisonment. Her ladyship was dreaming that she had at last defeated D'Artagnan, and was looking on the spectacle of his death, and it was the sight of his abominated blood flowing beneath the executioner's axe, which aroused the charming smile that hovered on her lips. She slept like a prisoner lulled by dawning hope. On the next morning, when they entered the room, she was still in bed. Felton remained in the corridor. He had brought with him the woman of whom he had spoken on the previous evening, and who had just arrived. This woman entered and approached her ladyship's bed, offering her services. Her ladyship was naturally pale, and her complexion would, therefore, easily deceive anyone who saw her for the first time. "I'm feverish," she said. "I've not slept a moment throughout the tedious night. I'm in dreadful suffering. Will you be more humane than you were yesterday evening? All I ask is to be permitted to remain in bed." "Would you like a physician to be summoned?" asked the woman. Felton listened to this dialogue without uttering a word. Her ladyship reflected that the more numerous the persons who surrounded her, the more there would be to soften, and the more the severe would be the vigilance of Lord de Winter. Besides, the physician might declare that the malady was feigned, and her ladyship, having lost her first throw, did not design to lose her second. "A physician," said she, "and for what purpose? Those gentlemen declared yesterday that my illness was all a comedy. It will undoubtedly be the same today, for since last night there's been abundant time to prejudice the doctor." "Then," said Felton in a tone of impatience, "say yourself, madam, what you desire to have done." "Ah, my God, how can I tell? I feel my sufferings, and that is all. Give me what you please. It is of little consequence to me." "Go for Lord de Winter," said Felton, wearied by these repeated complaints. "Oh, no, no," exclaimed the lady. "No, sir, do not send for him, I beseech you. I'm very well. I do not want anything. Do not send for him." She uttered this exclamation with a vehemence so natural that Felton was attracted for a few steps into the chamber. "He's touched," thought her ladyship. "And yet, madam," said Felton, "if you are really suffering, we must send for a physician. If you are deceiving us, so much the worse for yourself, but at all events we shall have nothing with which to reproach ourselves." Her ladyship made no reply, but turning her beautiful head on the pillow, she burst into a paroxysm of tears and sobs. Felton looked at her for a moment with his ordinary insensibility, but seeing that the crisis threatened to continue, he left the room. The woman followed him, and Lord de Winter did not make his appearance. "I think I begin to see a method," muttered the lady with savage delight, as she buried herself under the bedclothes to hide from those who might be watching her this burst of heartfelt satisfaction. 2 hours passed away. "It is now time for my malady to end," thought she. "Let me get up and gain some benefit today. I have but 10 days, and by this evening 2 of them will have already passed away." When the servants entered the lady's chamber in the morning, her breakfast had been brought. She concluded that they soon would return to take it away, and then she should not see Felton again. Her ladyship was not deceived. Felton reappeared, and without noticing whether the lady had touched anything or not, he ordered the attendants to remove the table, which was generally brought in with everything laid out upon it. Felton, holding a book in his hand, saw every other person leave the room. Reclining in an easy chair near the fireplace, beautiful, pale, and resigned, her ladyship looked like a holy virgin expecting martyrdom. Felton approached her and said, "Lord de Winter, who, like yourself, madam, is a Catholic, has imagined that the loss of the rites and ceremonies of your religion might be painful to you. He therefore permits you to read the daily office of your Mass, and here is a book which contains the ritual." From the manner with which Felton laid the book on the little table near her ladyship, from the tone with which he pronounced the words "your Mass," and from the contemptuous smile with which he accompanied them, her ladyship raised her head and looked more attentively at the officer. Then, by that stiff manner of wearing the hair, by that dress of exaggerated simplicity, by that forehead as polished as marble but equally hard and impenetrable, she recognized one of those gloomy Puritans whom she had often met with, both at the court of King James and at that of the King of France, where, in spite of the recollections of St. Bartholomew, they sometimes came to seek refuge. She then experienced one of those sudden inspirations which are reserved for geniuses alone, on those great emergencies, those momentous crises which decide their fortunes or their lives. Those two words, your mass, and a single glance at Felton had in fact revealed to her all the pregnancy of the answer which she was about to make. But with that rapidity of intelligence which was peculiar to her, that answer presented itself as if ready-framed upon her lips. "I?" said she in an accent of contempt, equal to that which she had observed in the voice of the young officer. "I, sir, my mass? Lord de Winter, the corrupted Catholic, well knows that I am not of his religion, and it is a snare which he wishes to spread for me." "And of what religion are you, then, madam?" demanded Felton with an astonishment, which, in spite of his self-command, he could not perfectly conceal. "I will tell it," exclaimed the lady with feigned enthusiasm, "when I shall have suffered sufficiently for my faith." The looks of Felton displayed to her ladyship all the extent of space which she had opened to herself by this single expression. And yet the young officer remained mute and motionless. His countenance alone had spoken. "I am in the hands of my enemies," continued she, in the enthusiastic tone which she knew was popular among the Puritans. "Well, either may my God save me, or may I perish for my God. That is the answer which I beg you to convey to Lord de Winter. And as to this book," continued she, pointing to the ritual with the tip of her finger, but without touching it, as though she would have been contaminated by the contact, "you may carry it away, and make use of it yourself, for you are undoubtedly doubly the accomplice of Lord de Winter, an accomplice in his persecution, and an accomplice in his heresy." Felton made no reply, but he took the book with the same repugnance that he had before manifested, and in a pensive mood withdrew. Lord de Winter came at about 5 in the evening. During the day her ladyship had found time to trace a plan of procedure, and she received him like a woman who had already recovered all her advantages. "It appears," said the Baron, seating himself on a chair opposite the lady, and stretching his feet carelessly toward the hearth, "it appears that we have made a slight apostasy." "What do you mean, sir?" "I mean that since the last time we met we have changed our religion. Have you by chance married a third husband, a Protestant?" "Explain yourself, my lord," replied the prisoner with great dignity, "for I hear your words, but I do not understand them." "Then the truth must be that you have no religion at all. Well, I like that the better," said Lord de Winter with a sneer. "It is certainly more in unison with your own principles," coldly replied the lady. "Oh, I confess to you that it is quite a matter of indifference to me." "You can avow no religious indifference, my lord, but what your debauchery and crimes sufficiently confirm." "What, and do you talk of debauchery, Madame Messalina? Do you talk of crimes, Lady Macbeth? Either I have misunderstood you, or you are, by God, exceedingly impudent." "You speak thus, my lord, because we are overheard," coldly replied her ladyship, "and you wish to prejudice your jailers and your executioners against me." "My jailers? My executioners? Why, madam, you speak poetically, and yesterday's comedy is turned tonight to tragedy. But after all, in 8 days you will be where you ought to be, and my task will be accomplished." "Infamous task! Impious task!" replied the lady, with the feigned enthusiasm of the martyr who provokes her judge. "I verily believe, upon my honour," said Lord de Winter, rising, "that this singular creature is going mad. Come, calm yourself, Madam Puritan, or I will put you into a dungeon. By Jove, it is my Spanish wine that's got into your head, is it not? But be quiet, this sort of intoxication is not dangerous, and will have no bad consequence." And Lord de Winter left the room swearing, which was at that time considered a habit perfectly gentlemanly. Felton was, in fact, behind the door, and had not lost one syllable of this conversation. Her ladyship had judged correctly. "Yes, go," said she to her brother. "The consequences are, on the contrary, fast approaching. but you, fool that you are, will not know them until it is too late to evade them. Silence again prevailed, and 2 more hours elapsed. Supper was served, and her ladyship was found engaged in prayers which she had picked up from an austere Puritan and old servant of her second husband. She appeared to be in a sort of ecstasy, and not even to observe what was passing around her. Felton made a sign that she was not to be disturbed, and when everything was arranged, he softly left the room with the soldiers. The lady knew that she might be watched, and therefore she continued her prayers until the end. She fancied that the sentinel at her door did not maintain his usual step, but seemed to listen to her. For the present, she desired nothing more. She arose, seated herself at the table, ate a little, and only drank some water. In the hour afterward, the table was renewed, but her ladyship remarked that on this occasion Felton did not accompany the soldiers. He was afraid, then, of seeing her too often. She turned her head aside to smile, for there was so much of triumph in that smile that it alone would have betrayed her. She allowed half an hour to elapse, and as everything was then entirely silent in the old castle, as no sound was heard but the eternal murmur of the surge, that mighty respiration of the sea, with her pure, thrilling, and harmonious voice, she began the first stanza of the psalm, which was then in great favor with the Puritans. Thou leavest us, O Lord, to prove if we are strong, but then thou dost afford the meed that to exertion should belong. These verses were not excellent. They were indeed far enough from it, but, as everyone knows, the Puritans did not pride themselves on poetry. Even as she sung, her ladyship listened. The sentinel on duty at her door had stopped as if transformed to stone. Her ladyship judged by that of the effect she had produced. She then continued her psalm with a fervor and feeling which are indescribable. It seemed to her as the sound diffused itself afar off beneath the arches, and went like a magic charm to melt the hearts of her oppressors. Nevertheless, it appeared as if the soldier on guard, a zealous Catholic no doubt, shook off the charm, for, through the grating which he opened, he exclaimed, "Be silent, madam, your song is as melancholy as a De Profundis. And if, besides the pleasure of being shut up in this garrison, we must be compelled also to hear these things, it will be perfectly unbearable." "Silence there," cried a severe voice, which the lady recognized as that of Felton. "What business is it of yours, fellow? Did anyone order you to hinder that woman from singing? No, you were told to guard her, to fire upon her if she attempted to escape. Guard her, then, shoot her if she tries to escape, but go not beyond your orders." An inexpressible gleam of joy illuminated that lady's countenance, but this gleam was transient as the lightning's flash, and, without appearing to have heard the dialogue, of which she had not lost a word, she resumed her singing, giving to her voice all the charm, all the power, all the seduction with which Satan had endowed it. For all my fears and cares, for exile and for chains, I have my youth, my prayers, and God who keeps a record of my pains. That voice of uncommon power and of sublime passion gave to the rude, unpolished poetry of these psalms a magic and an expression that the most exalted Puritans rarely detected in the songs of their brethren, which they were compelled to adorn with the aids of imagination. Felton thought that he was listening to the singing of the angel who comforted the 3 Israelites in the fiery furnace. The lady continued, "But God the just and strong our morn of freedom sends, and should our hopes be wrong, still martyrdom, still death our trial ends." This last couplet, into which the terrible enchantress had poured her whole soul, completed the disorder in the young officer's heart. He opened the door suddenly, and her ladyship saw his countenance, as pale as ever, but with flashing and almost delirious eyes. "Why do you sing in this manner?" said he, "and in such tones?" "Pardon me," said her ladyship softly. "I forgot my songs were not becoming in this house. I have no doubt wounded your religious feelings, but I assure you that it was unintentionally. Pardon, therefore, a fault which may be great, but which was certainly involuntary." Her ladyship looked so beautiful at that moment, and the religious enthusiasm which she had assumed had given such an expression in her countenance that Felton, completely dazzled, fancied that he now saw the angel whom he had before only heard. "Yes, yes," replied he. "Yes, you vex, you agitate the inhabitants of the castle." But the poor madman did not perceive the incoherence of his own language, whilst her ladyship plunged her lynx eye into the very depths of his heart. "I will be silent," said she, casting down her eyes, with all the softness that she could give to her voice, and with all the resignation which she could impart to her manner. "No, no, madam," said Felton, "only do not sing so loudly, and especially at night." After these words, Felton, feeling that he could no longer preserve his usual severity towards his prisoner, rushed out of the room. "You're right, Lieutenant," said the soldier. "Those songs disturb the soul, and yet one becomes in time accustomed to them. The voice is so beautiful."